Thank you, everyone. We are live.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Chantel Wright, and I'm the chair of the DC Public Charter School Board. Thank you for joining us this evening. I would like to welcome my fellow board members and colleagues, including Vice Chair Jim Salmon, Secretary Shakura Adamanfania, Leah Cruzy, Dwight Davis, and Nick Rodriguez will be joining us later. Our treasurer, Carissa Stanley Beatty, is not present this evening, but has submitted her formal proxy for tonight's meeting. In December, Dr. Walker Davis laid out the DC PCSB strategic roadmap that will guide us for the next 3 years. I know Dr. Walker Davis will talk about it more tonight, but I have to say that I'm impressed with the energy and focus this roadmap brings to our work. More than anything, we are taking a more active and assertive approach of evaluating school performance and connecting schools with necessary support. Separately, I had the privilege of speaking and conferring diplomas at Goodwill Excel Public Charter School graduation, which took place last week. It was the first of many more that we as board members will be involved with during this academic year. Seeing students receive their diplomas is one thing I love about being involved with DC PCSB. It truly warms my heart. This is also open enrollment season, which allows families to visit schools to learn more about the programs, meet the staff, and if the family so desire, complete an application in the My School DC Common Application Lottery. Families should do this for their high schoolers by February 3rd and for their pre-K through 8th graders by March 3rd. Lastly, I want to send my thoughts to our school leaders who are leading through some of the most consequential times in education, both politically and socially. Know that you each continue to be our champions. We see you as you seek to continue to strive for excellence and work to create safe and thriving school communities for the children of DC. Thank you for all you do. Please continue to take care of yourselves as you take care of your staff, students, and families. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Walker Davis.
Thank you, Chair Wright. In December, Will Henderson, our Chief Operating Officer, and I spoke about our financial oversight. Because of the importance of that issue, I wanted to highlight it again for those who may have missed the meeting. In the past few months, we've been looking more closely at the important topic of financial oversight of public charter schools and how we and LEAs can strengthen our work in this area. As our team knows, we launched this initiative after the closure of Eagle. I truly believe, and I know our board and staff agree with me, that our work can and should improve. We all believe that families, LEA school boards, LEA staff, and the public should have a deeper understanding of this important work. This is an important emphasis for us as outlined in our strategic roadmap. Not only are we moving forward aggressively in this direction, but we're also committed to sharing more information with the public and policymakers about our work. Concurrent with this, we are publishing more information through blogs, reports, and other means about our financial work. On a related matter, I've often spoken about the 5 tools DCPCSB uses in oversight. They are qualitative site reviews, or QSRs, our financial analysis report, or FAR, ongoing monitoring, Aspire, and charter review and renewal. Tonight, we are beginning our charter review and renewal season. We have a presentation a little later, but I wish to emphasize the critical nature of this work. As you know, charters are the contract between our board and the boards of individual LEAs. Each charter is specifically written and outlines what the school commits to do to serve their students. Charters are very important documents, which is why our staff reviews each charter every 5 years. Our review evaluates the school's academic and financial performance, as well as its compliance with applicable law. We call this process a charter review. In the 15th year of a school's operation, we do what is called a charter renewal, which is when we decide whether that school should receive another 15-year charter. Tonight, Gina Lucchese of our staff will give a presentation about what the charter review and renewal process entail. She will do this because at our March board meeting, DC-PCSB will begin the charter review and renewal process for specific LEAs. And as you know, we have 20 schools up for review this season. I have one last item before we move into the agenda for tonight. The notice of concern for Seed Public Charter School that was issued in October. A notice of concern is an official communication issued by DC-PCSB to a charter school that has failed to comply with specific requirements or standards. Seed PCS failed to comply with federal and local special education compliance regulations, our special education audit and monitoring policy, the Fair Access to School Act, and the data and document submission and verification policy of DC-PCSB. We want to assure the public that we continue to actively follow up and monitor the school's compliance with all applicable regulations and policies. We are diligently collecting all relevant information through multiple monitoring and oversight practices. And these practices include unannounced visits of the evening program, monthly monitoring and analysis of all data submissions, requests for specific documentation related to special education municipal regulations, and investigations of all community complaints received. In addition to the enhanced monitoring and oversight, 3 board members and I visited the school and its classrooms and talked with students about their experience attending the school. Additionally, our staff will be conducting a qualitative site review of the school's academic program throughout the month of February. While there is no action required of the board today, there will be more detailed conversation at a future board meeting to provide an analysis of the information we've collected to date. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to you, Chair Wright. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. At the beginning of every board meeting, the DC Public Charter School Board hears public testimony related to items on the agenda and listens to testimony for topics not related to any agenda items. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. If you need to make a few additional points, please email your testimony for us to read at public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Public officials who sign up to testify will be allowed to speak for up to 5 minutes. The hand-raising feature has been disabled. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you would like to register to provide live testimony or submit a written comment to the board, you can find all testimony registration and submission information on our website under the Public Comment tab at dcpcsb.org. You can also submit your comments to public.comments@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660 and select option 2. As we move through each speaker, Courtney and Jonah, our Zoom hosts for the evening, will promote each speaker from the attendee pool and unmute individuals speaking. Let's hear from the 3 individuals who signed up to speak this evening. I'd like to invite to testify before the board, Brianna Graham. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, board. Brianna is on the phone, so we might not see her, but she is allowed to talk now.
Okay. Good evening, Brianna. Brianna, can you hear us?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So I really appreciate you all having me for this meeting. And so essentially what I wanted to discuss today was equity and inclusion. As of recent, I have experienced some issues in which I feel like my child is not receiving equitable, inclusive education. And I think there are many parameters surrounding that aren't just singular to any school, but are, to me, appear to be a systematic issue. And so I want to address some of those concerns, and it is my hope that, this is heard across the board so that there can be some change evoked into my son's education. And so, number one, I would like to speak regarding training of all educators, of all support staff, of all dedicated aides. I am seeing an extreme lack across the board, and unfortunately, my child has received unjust treatment because of that. And so it is my hope that there'll be some honest and intentional work into addressing this. I know there is a shortage of teachers across the district, and as a parent, I'm doing everything I can outside of school to supplement what is not happening in the school, and it is at this point becoming extremely hard for me. And that is really what I wanted to bring to you all today.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. I know that a member of the Public Charter School Board staff will be following up with you directly, but thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And no problem. And something else I really just want to hone in on is that my child isn't just destructive. He's signifying that he needs assistance and that his needs are not being met. And I feel like instead of being met with compassion and understanding, I feel like he's facing an environment that did not adjust to his unique needs. And so instead of him being offered a voice, I feel like it is a systematic approach to try to silence him. And this is not just a issue of a failure to provide appropriate accommodations. To me, it's a failure to empathize and understand. And I just feel like every child deserves to feel heard, seen, and every child just deserves to feel supported. And the consequences of these oversights have been profound for me, and not just my child, but for other children with special needs.
Absolutely.
So thank you all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Graham. And now we'll hear from our next public speaker, Carrie Savage.
Carrie has been promoted.
Thank you.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Ms. Savage. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much to the Public Charter School Board members and staff. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment today on PCSB's charter review and renewal process. I am writing today to highlight what I have heard from PAVE parent leaders on the issue, especially after the recent closure of Eagle Academy Public Charter School. First, PCSB has already taken some steps in line with what we have heard from PAVE parent leaders, particularly around more rigorous financial oversight practices and communicating directly with the board of any LEA when financial mismanagement or challenges persist. As Eagle Academy board members noted, they were not aware of the depth and breadth of the financial issues and therefore were limited in their ability to act in a more timely manner. PCSB taking this step will empower LEA board members to act sooner and better serve their school communities. Secondly, PAVE parent leaders have echoed what was discussed at the recent council hearing on Eagle's closure regarding the need for more robust training for LEA board members. This is especially true for parent board members whose lived experience is extremely valuable to have at the table to inform school decisions, but their expertise around governance can vary widely. Many Eagle Academy board members shared that they were not all fully aware of the extent of Eagle's financial challenges due to a poor combination of poor communication from school leadership and lack of understanding of their fiduciary responsibilities. Comprehensive training for all board members upon appointment will help ensure trustees can fulfill their oversight role, ideally to help identify a strategy to rectify any issues, minimally to prevent such a sudden closure if necessary. Finally, I want to highlight what I have heard from PAVE parent leaders that we haven't heard discussed in detail at public meetings yet, but I hope will be reflected in tonight's updates. First, direct communication between PCSB and the school community when an LEA has serious potential for closure. Upon enrolling in a public charter school, parents put their trust in both individual schools and PCSB as the independent authorizer and oversight body. Parents and the school community members felt blindsided when they learned of Eagle's closure, despite knowing there was for months. Sorry. Well, I can email my full testimony.
Apologies, I'm on mute. You can finish your last line. Go ahead.
Thank you. Essentially just wanted to know, I'll try to sum up the rest quickly. Uh, Relied on school leadership to share updates, but unfortunately that communication never came. And even parents were affirmed by school leadership that their enrollment was secure. So just wanting to see a clear process from PCSB to engage school communities directly on their perspective on any potential closure and next step, making sure that parents' voices are heard at all steps of the chartering process, opening, renewal, and if needed, revocation or relinquishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for that feedback. Next, we have Sebastian Gilmar.
So we have one caller who hasn't been called yet. This might be Sebastian. I'm going to unmute the caller and see if it's him, and if not, we'll push them back down, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Caller, if you're on the phone, you're allowed to talk now.
Sebastian, is this you at the 703 number? Okay, Joan, I don't think that is that individual. So we will move on. You can let us know if Sebastian shows up, and depending on where we are, we may be able to hear their feedback. If not, Sebastian, if you can hear us, please do send your feedback to us via email. We would appreciate hearing from you. Thank you to our speakers this evening. This concludes the public comment portion of our agenda. Next on our agenda is a discussion item, review and renewal overview. For that, I will yield the floor to Gina Lucchese, I apologize, Gina, Senior Specialist in School Quality and Evaluation. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, Chair Wright. I am going to share my screen.
Joan, I think we can also have Carrie be removed from the panel. Thank you, Carrie. Bye.
All right, thank you, Chair Wright. The topic of this presentation today is to give information about how we regularly review a school's charter. As Dr. Walker Davis mentioned, a charter is the contract that a school has with this board, and reviewing a school's contract or charter is a key component of charter school accountability, which helps to ensure that schools fulfill their commitment to students, families, and the public. Ultimately, the charter review and renewal process helps to ensure student success across our charter schools. In order to fully understand why we conduct charter reviews and renewals and what they are, as well as how they contribute to student success, we must take a step back to understand what charter schools are and the role of charter school authorizers. So as written directly in the name, charter schools are public, which means that they are publicly funded and tuition free. DC charter schools are also open to all DC residents. So unlike many traditional public schools, there's no geographical boundary or neighborhood boundary. And in contrast to traditional public schools, which are typically run by a central authority, public charter schools are operated by nonprofits. And we refer to these nonprofits as independent local education agencies, or LEAs. So in DC, again, this is in contrast to the traditional public schools, which are run by the Chancellor of DC Public Schools. Instead, these individual independent LEAs are governed by charters, which are the contracts between the LEA's board and this board, DC PCSB. So we have 68 independent LEAs currently in DC, And each of those has their own board. So we'll refer to those as an LEA board or a school board, and they each hold a charter agreement with us, DCPCSB. And so with being independent LEAs, charter schools have more flexibility, and autonomy in designing their educational programming. With that comes greater accountability. So the charter schools are responsible for achieving academic goals that are written into their charter agreement, as well as following applicable laws and maintaining financial health. DCPCSB is DC's only charter authorizer. So it is our responsibility as the authorizer to ensure that public charter schools are delivering on these things listed here. So the first is their educational programming that prepares students for success in college and career. We must ensure that schools are complying with applicable laws, as well as responsibly managing and using their public funds. And as the authorizer, it is one of our responsibilities to close public charter schools that are failing to meet their obligations to students, families, and the taxpayers that supply their funds. And so why does DCPCSB conduct charter reviews and renewals? As Dr. Walker-Davis alluded to at the beginning of this meeting, charter reviews and renewals are built-in mechanisms for DCPCSB as the oversight agency to decide on school continuance. They help us to understand school performance and to take appropriate action based on that performance. And they are a key component of our oversight, as Dr. Walker-Davis mentioned earlier as well. They are also required by law. So they are legislated by the School Reform Act, which came into effect in 1995 when the DC public charter school sector began. When you think about the life cycle of a charter school, it is our responsibility to first approve the public charter school's contract or charter, which lasts for a term of 15 years. We also must review each charter school at least once every 5 years. And during a school's 15th year, each school must apply for a renewal of their charter agreement in order to operate for an additional 15 years. At each review or renewal, our board determines the status of the school's charter. So there can be 3 possible outcomes, which I will be speaking about throughout this presentation. And they are, number 1, to continue the charter. So the school would continue operating as it has been. The second one is to conditionally continue the charter, which in that case, DCPCSB would place specific requirements on the charter that the school would have to meet in order to continue operating. Or lastly, DCPCSB could revoke a school's charter, in which case the school would stop operating at the end of that school year. And here's a visual that displays this timeline. Excuse me. So if you can imagine a charter school, we would have approved it to open. And at its 5th year of operation, we would conduct a 5-year charter review, at which point our board would decide whether to continue, conditionally continue, or revoke the school's charter. And assuming the school's charter is continued, we would then conduct a 10-year review at the 10-year mark with the same 3 possible outcomes and so forth. And you can see that there is a renewal every 15 years, and that is because, as I mentioned, the charter agreement itself lasts for a term of 15 years. So before I get into more detail about this process, I would like to name the charter schools that are up for review this year. These schools will come before our board between March and June of this year. And they're all up for their charter review. None of them are up for their renewal. So I will pause here a moment so everyone can read the slide. There are, as I mentioned, 68 LEAs in total in DC. And so this is the remainder of those 68 LEAs. You can see which year each of these schools is coming up for their review. And they all are coming up on this slide between 25-26 through school year 28-29. The schools with the asterisks are coming up for their charter renewal. And I'll pause here so you can read the slide. This information also is on our website. There is a calendar that contains all of this information. Right. One thing I wanted to note is that charter reviews and renewals examine a 5-year period. So there's a visual on this slide to help illustrate that, for example, if a school comes up for review this school year, which is 24-25, we would review the previous 5-year time period of 5 complete school years. So the 20 schools that I showed a few slides ago, we will be reviewing school years 2019-20 through 2023-24. And one of the main reasons that we do it this way and that we don't look at the current school year is because school performance data takes time to collect, clean, and ensure accuracy, and then analyze. So some of our important data pieces will come to us the following fall. Like, for example, students take state assessments in English language arts and math in the spring, usually April or May. And that data for those state assessments typically becomes available in the following fall when the next school year is already underway. And for us, obviously, it is crucial to make sure that these data are accurate and that we've analyzed them properly prior to making any high stakes decisions about school continuance. So we do look at a historical 5-year period of the most recent 5 completed school years. At each charter review or renewal, we assess 3 categories of information about school performance, and I will present these in great detail later in the presentation. Just so you know, for right now, those categories are number 1, academics. So we look at whether the school fulfilled the charter goals in its agreement that measure academic achievement. The second is compliance. This includes compliance with the school's charter and applicable laws. And the third is finance. So we look at the school's financial management and economic viability. There are 3 possible outcomes. So as I mentioned before, just to illustrate this point, for either review or renewal, the 3 possible outcomes feel very much the same for students and families. So the first 2 possibilities is that the school continues operating. The first one is the school just continues as normal. We call this full continuance or renewal. The second possibility is that the school continues with conditions on its charter. That means that DC PCSB would require the school to meet annual targets or some sort of benchmark in order to continue operating. And in these cases, oftentimes the school may be required to close at the end of an upcoming school year if it does not meet those targets. And the last possibility is revocation or non-renewal. In that case, a school would close at the end of the current school year in which the board vote takes place. So how do charter reviews and renewals impact students and families? First, there are long-term benefits for students and families, and these are really the motivation for doing the charter reviews and renewals and for having them codified in law. And those long-term benefits include that they help us sustain high performing schools. And so in the long run, when we continue a high performing school, that ensures that students and families have access to those high quality schools. And they help us address low performing schools. So revoking a charter for a low performing school or placing an improvement condition on a school will allow the charter sector to have high quality school options in the long run with strong student outcomes. And there are also short-term effects for students and families. The first is that students and families can gain a better understanding of their school's performance, including how well the school is performing compared to other schools in the city. So if a family or a student were to log on to one of our board meetings or watch a YouTube recording of it later, or to log on to our website to read the charter review report or skim the first section, that's a good way to gain a better understanding of the school's performance. And this can help with school choice decisions. Another short-term effect is that obviously a school can close as a result of its charter review. So specific to this cycle, for example, a school could close as early as the end of this school year as a result of charter revocation. Or another possibility is that a school could close in one of the upcoming school years as a result of conditional continuance. So as I mentioned earlier, these conditions typically place a requirement that a school must meet or face closure. So if the school were to fail to meet that requirement and we have that data come out during school year 25-26, that school would be required to close at the end of the 25-26 school year. And so just to be clear about what happens when DC PCSB revokes a school's charter, this is just an example timeline that could occur. To be clear, this charter revocation is a possibility in any charter review cycle, not just this current one that we are speaking about for this year. But just as an example, if in April a school's charter is revoked, the school would continue to operate through May and its final day in June. And then after that, the school would close and families would enroll their student in a different school for the following year. And what happens if DCPCSB conditionally continues a school's charter? As I said, the school may be required to meet specific conditions or benchmarks in future school years. And if those performance benchmarks are met, the school would continue to operate as normal. But if they're not met, the school faces consequences such as closure, which would take the form of charter relinquishment. Or in the past, there have been times where we have required closure of one or more campuses. So there may be an LEA that operates multiple campuses and only one or two of them could be underperforming. That case could occur, or a phase out of particular grade levels. So there have been cases in the past where, for example, there could be a middle and high school LEA where the middle school may not be performing well, but the high school is. So we may require the middle school to meet particular benchmarks or phase out those grade levels. And so I'm going to show over the next few slides a few example conditions that we have actually used in the past. So these examples are text from prior charter review reports. This one is an academic condition similar to the one I just described. So we required a multi-campus school to the middle school campus to meet specific targets. And the bold text on this slide is describing the PMF, that's our performance management framework, which is our previous accountability system. The PMF scores the school had to meet each year would be either 47 or 49, or achieve a star rating of at least 3 stars, and that is from the Office for the State Superintendent of Education's accountability system that they used to have a star rating. And as you can see, we have language that states that if the campus fails to meet either target, it would cease admitting students at the end of a particular school year. The next example is a compliance-related condition, and this was a school that we found issues with its compliance with our procurement policy, which requires schools to report procurement contracts to us. And so we required that this school submit a plan for improving their compliance with that policy. And in a case where we recognize any non-compliance, the school would, or I'm sorry, we would have to engage the school's board about needed improvements and or take additional action as appropriate under our policy. This example is a special education compliance example. And so we reiterated that this school needed to remain compliant with laws related to students with disabilities, and any failure to remain compliant with those requirements could result in us conducting an immediate high stakes review. So in this case, that means that instead of just having its charter review on the 5-year cycle, if we found any non-compliance, we would bring that school up for an earlier charter review, at which case the board would again evaluate and see whether we wanted to conditionally continue or revoke that school's charter. So that is another possible consequence. And then I have a couple finance examples. In this case, we had a LEA with weak financial health and low enrollment. And as you know, enrollment does affect financial health because schools receive a per student public funding. And so we required this school to decrease its enrollment ceiling, which is the maximum possible enrollment that the school can have, and submit a 5-year budget to describe how they will remain economically viable. And another finance example regarding a school with over-reliance on philanthropic funds. In this case, we required that the school provide evidence that a $500,000 per year had been secured for particular school years. And we also required them to enter into a financial corrective action plan, which is a financial intervention that we do for that we put into place if needed, that is designed to support the school to get back to a healthy financial position. And so here's a question you may have been wondering. I'm going to dive into the details about the difference between charter review and renewal. So first, I'm going to show you the language from the School Reform Act. This slide shows the charter review standard, and I will just pause for a moment so that you can skim these 2 paragraphs. So as you can see, the first paragraph talks about violations of law or of the charter. So that is the compliance piece, and the academic achievement expectations. So there's your academic piece. The board has discretion for those 2 pieces at charter review. So if we do find a violation of law or that the school has not met its academic goals, the board can either revoke or continue the school's charter, which of course could be subject to a condition. But the second paragraph, in contrast, shows that the law does not allow us to have any discretion regarding finance. So if at charter review, we find that a school has either engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles, has engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable, the law would require us to revoke that school's charter. And here is the charter renewal standard. So the second paragraph about finance is exactly the same. So I'll go ahead and pause for you to skim the first paragraph. Okay, so as you can see, the main difference here between the review standard and the renewal standard is that the renewal standard does not allow for discretion. So as you can see, the legal language says that we shall approve a renewal application, except that we shall not if a school has violated applicable law or its charter, or if the school has failed to meet its goals. And that finance piece is the same. So still no discretion if we find one of those three finance issues. And so to sum up, the main difference between review and renewal is that discretion piece. And at review, as I said, we have discretion regarding academic goals and compliance. And at renewal, we do not have discretion. However, we never have discretion regarding the finance piece. And the terminology is a little bit different. You may have noticed at review, we talk about a charter being continued or revoked, whereas at renewal, a charter is either renewed or not renewed. And that is because the charter agreement is for a term of 15 years. And so we will actually draft a new charter agreement at renewal. And so for the final part of this presentation, we're going to spend some time talking about the information that DC PCSB examines for charter reviews and renewals. First, the goals and student academic achievement expectation information. There are different types of charter goals that schools can elect. The first type is electing the framework or system that DC PCSB is using as its charter goals. So as I mentioned before, we used to have the PMF as our accountability system, and we have developed a new one called Aspire, which is going to come online with this current school year's data. And so a school can basically adopt, a school can adopt our new accountability system, Aspire, as their charter goals. And what this would look like is written into the charter agreement. There would be some sort of targets or benchmarks that the school would agree to meet over their review period in order to be considered as having met their goals. The other possibility, or the other type of goals, I should say, is called individually negotiated goals. And when a school negotiates individual goals with us, those are unique charter goals with specific targets written into the charter agreement that the school agrees to meet. So we do have parameters around this, around what the goals can include and also what they must include. And one of those parameters is that they must include English language arts and math performance goals. I do also want to mention that DC PCSB currently uses goal attainment pathways from our charter goals policy. These pathways serve as a temporary accountability system prior to the formal use of the Aspire system. And a key purpose of these pathways is to provide schools with additional opportunities to meet their charter goals in the years immediately following the pandemic. So if you watch a charter review board meeting in this cycle, you will hear us talk about the goal attainment pathways as a way to meet the charter goals. So no matter what type of goals a school elects, they will contain key academic measures. And I'm giving just a few examples here. The key measures for the school will depend on the grade levels that the school serves, and the type of school that it is. So they can include English language arts and math proficiency, as well as growth. For high schools, we would look at things like graduation rates, SAT and ACT scores, and college acceptance rates. For schools serving pre-kindergarten only, we look at pre-literacy, math, and social emotional skills. And there's a host of other measures, but I'm just giving a few examples here. We also look at student group performance, including English proficiency growth rates for emerging multilingual learner students, which are our students that do not speak English as their first language. Also, we look at student group performance for students with disabilities, students from economically disadvantaged households, and Black students, Hispanic or Latino students, and students of other racial groups. And I do want to emphasize that we compare school performance across other schools in DC and to national academic growth benchmarks when appropriate. Some additional academic performance information that we use in our reviews. First is the qualitative site review. And for our qualitative site reviews, DC PCSB observers visit schools and observe English, math, science, and social studies classes. Observers rate the quality of the classroom environment and the quality of instruction using a framework called the Charlotte Danielson Framework for Teaching. This is a research-based rubric that is used to assess teaching practice, and it's used nationwide and as well in at least 15 countries as well. So these qualitative site reviews give us a snapshot of what's happening at the school and a sense of students' experience at the school, which we feel is important information. They also evaluate schools' programming for students with disabilities and emerging multilingual learners. So we get important information about how schools are serving those students as well. And additional contextual information that we look at is school environment measures, such as the in-seat attendance rate or the chronic absenteeism rate. We look at the re-enrollment rate, which is the rate of students who return to the school for the following school year, the out-of-school suspension rate, and the mid-year withdrawal rate, which is the rate of students leaving the school in the middle of a school year. Now I'm going to speak about the compliance pieces of information that we look at during the charter review and renewal process. First off, special education compliance. So as you know, charter schools must comply with federal and local special education laws, including IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. As the state education agency, the Office for the State Superintendent of Education monitors schools' compliance with these laws. And at review and renewal, we report the results of their oversight, as well as any state or due process complaints, which are formal complaints that have been made about the school's compliance with these laws. And we also conduct our oversight via our audit and monitoring policy. So if there have been any audit actions over the review period, we will report on those. For example, there are many things that could trigger an audit, but one example is if a school is suspending its special education students at a rate that is disproportionate, we would flag that school for an audit and take an audit action that the school would need to follow up with. So all of that information is contained in the charter review. Another compliance piece is compliance with our emerging multilingual learner audit and monitoring policy. So through this policy, schools are required to provide meaningful access to curricular programs, provide effective language assistance to emerging multilingual learner or EML students, identify and assess potential EML students to ensure that they are receiving services, and monitor and exit them from services appropriately, as well as evaluate EML students for special education and provide dual services when needed. And similar to what I was describing with special education audit policy, we would report any audit actions pertaining to the EML audit and monitoring policy in the review and renewal reports. We also look at compliance with our procurement contract policy. So charter schools are legally required to use competitive bidding for any contracts valued at $25,000 or more. And they have to submit to us all bids received and the contractor selected, as well as the rationale. So we would report on any early warning notices or notices of concern on this policy. And there are a host of other compliance monitoring items that we are doing on an annual basis, such as accreditation, submission of documents to us timely, all of the safety regulations regarding emergency response, fire drills, that sort of thing. And there are many more that I haven't listed here. These sorts of things, as I said, are monitored annually. And if there are patterns or major issues, we would certainly take that into account at charter review or renewal. And with that, I will turn the presentation to my colleague, Will Henderson, who's going to present about the financial health piece.
Thanks, Gina. You all have certainly heard from me in recent months about the financial oversight work the DC Public Charter School Board is responsible for. So some of this will be a refresher course. So the first thing that's important to note, to articulate, is what we are looking for during the review and renewal cycle. The three things that the law requires that we assess a school for are economic viability, patterns of fiscal mismanagement, and compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, which are standard accounting rules that firms for all organizations like our schools must comply with. In essence, we are looking to see that each of the LEAs in our portfolio have the resources and a plan to support their mission and goals and are doing so ethically. To conduct our analysis, we assess for financial performance in a very holistic way, as we've discussed. In particular, we review a lot of documents. We look at the past 5 years of a school's financial statements, and we look forward into their future fiscal year. We collect tons and tons of information. Just a handful of examples are listed here to understand each of our LEA's unique scenarios. In particular, we have 8 financial indicators that help us assess the financial health. I have articulated each of these 8 key financial indicators here and associated them with some layman's terminology to help the community understand what each of these financial indicators are showing us about our LEAs. The first is change in net assets. This is an indicator that measures whether a school is making more money than it's spending. The second KFI is called the aggregated 3-year margin. This indicator looks at how a school has been doing financially over the past 3 years and helps us understand if things are getting better, worse, or staying neutral over time. The current ratio indicator checks if a school has enough money to pay its bills that are upcoming. A high number means that the school is in good shape to pay what it owes. The fourth indicator is called cash flow from operations, and this tells if a school helps us articulate if a school is making enough, bringing in enough cash in the routine operation of the school. And as Gina mentioned earlier, the per pupil revenue that each of our LEAs get based on their enrollment is the key driver of this. And some of our schools also receive private donations. The fifth KFI is called days of cash on hand. And this shows us how many days the school could keep going if it stopped getting any money immediately. The sixth indicator is called primary reserve ratio, and this looks at how much savings the school has for emergencies compared to how much it spends in a given year. The debt ratio shows how much of a school's resources are tangled up in debt. Of course, a lower number is better because it means less of their money is going back to pay loans. And our final KFI is called enrollment variance. This looks at how close the school is to meeting its enrollment goals. Growing and stable numbers of students typically mean better financial health. It's important to note that these KFIs, all 8 of these KFIs, help us understand the larger picture of each of our unique LEAs. So finally, what happens if these indicators do not share a favorable picture? Um, there are several options that we have at our disposal. A school does not need to meet or exceed all KFIs all of the time. Again, they're helping us understand the story of the picture of their financial health. If a school has 1 to 2 unfavorable KFIs, we will continue the typical monitoring work that we've discussed in the recent months. And that typical monitoring work helps us through that process. We get close with the LEA's financial team and understand what is causing these unfavorable indicators. And lastly, if there are several problems, or if the problems that we determine, or a given problem that we determine is particularly large, we use a stringent monitoring process and or may recommend discontinuance at the review time. Again, we've gone in depth at this process in the last couple of board meetings. Inevitably, our recommendation is based on whether our analysis shows that a school is financially healthy enough to continue serving their students in accordance with its charter.
Thank you, Will. And that concludes our presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Great. Thank you, Gina and team. Before I turn it over to the board, this is a very thorough presentation about reviews and renewals. If there happened to be a school leader watching or a member of the LEA board that would want to have access to this information, will this be publicly made publicly available to them on our website or something? I can see this being, that is a hint to school leaders and LEA board members as a very strong tool to prepare for reviews and renewals.
Thank you, Chair Wright. Yes, the presentation will be available on our website where we do publish the materials for board meetings. I would also encourage, if those folks weren't able to join us tonight, to look at the video of this board meeting, any portion of it. And then also, any of the schools that are under review have probably already heard from Gina multiple times, and will continue to hear from Gina and team in preparation for their review. But I would say for other families who are part of the school communities that are under review, or folks who are curious about what this process looks like for upcoming years, I would encourage them to look at the materials here. And then our engagement team is looking at many options to get this to our parent communities and some other communities so that they have information about this broader work in process. So thanks for that question.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to fellow board members. Vice Chair Salmon.
Thank you, Chantel. Gina and Will, thank you for a remarkably thorough and clear presentation. This is very clear, very easy to follow. I really appreciate that. I have a question about the timing of our renewal and review decisions relative to the decisions families have to make about their choice of school. So the My School DC process opens around now every year. But our process for making review and renewal decisions, which may yield information of great value to parents, doesn't begin. We'll begin doing this next month and for the months thereafter. And as been noted, parents don't like the surprise of finding out that a school they've chosen or already enrolled in is going to be closing, or that it might be subject to conditions that could cause them to question the long-term viability of the school. Is there anything that can be done to bring our renewal and review process onto a schedule that would provide information earlier in the school selection process? I think I know the answer, but I need to ask it because if I were a younger parent, that would be on my mind.
I'll take this question. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melody Sampson, and I'm the Chief School Performance Officer at the Public Charter School Board. And I will name that the data collection and validation timeline has just shifted over the years. We don't receive data as early as we would like to. And so that, of course, has had an implication on when we're able to bring review and renewal votes before the board for a vote. We have been collaborating with our partners at the Office of the State Superintendent for Education. Our data team has been really working hard, and the hope is that we can get back onto a cycle of being able to do these continuance and renewal votes earlier in the school year, but we're just not at that moment now. But there is plenty of information available to families, even at this moment. We expect schools to be engaging with their families regularly through newsletters and their open public meetings to discuss their school performance and be sharing with their families and older students how their school is doing and how their school might wind up showing up faring on the review or the renewal. I'd also point families to OSSE's website. They publish state assessment data in August. And then, of course, we have the qualitative site reviews that Gina described earlier tonight. We conduct the QSR a year before a school is up for review or renewal, and that gives families an in-depth snapshot of what's happening in the school and what kind of curricular materials and assignments students are receiving. And I've heard over the years that those have been pretty robust, meaningful bits of information to help a family make school choice decisions. No, the timing is not ideal, but it is also possible for families to go ahead and submit an application through the My School DC lottery, even if they don't yet know the ultimate renewal or review decision. There's no downside in submitting that application.
Thank you.
Board Member Cruzy.
I want to echo Vice Chair Sandman's note of gratitude for the really thorough presentation, Gina and Will. Thank you for that. And I imagine my questions, I have two questions, and I'm coming from the perspective of a parent. In my case, I actually do happen to have a child at a DCPS school and a child in a charter school. And that combined with some timing questions as I think about my kids' schools and I'm thinking about what is the school we're in the right school for us going forward. Why is it that one school goes through this process and one school doesn't? I don't mean so much from a systems level, but from my experience, the lottery is open right now. And then kind of related to that, I know you mentioned something about, I don't mean timing by months, but timing of years. my parent's experience is very proximal. What I'm hearing from my child today, what I'm experienced over the last few months. And sometimes the information that comes before us is out of sync with my experience, whether it looks a whole lot better than I'm experiencing or it looks a whole lot worse than I'm experiencing. Can you help me in both of those accounts where I get what real information is? And should I look at it from my school? Do I look at it from PCSB? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, Leah. I appreciate it. To your first question about why, like, let's say you do have multiple children, some of them are in traditional public schools at the District of Columbia Public School System. Some of them may be in charter schools here in DC. The reason that one school is under higher scrutiny is because the charter school is operating as an independent nonprofit and not as part of that centralized district office, which mandates, like at DC Public Schools, the central district office will have a higher level of control over the curriculum, the training that teachers are receiving, and the activities happening in the classrooms. Whereas the independent nonprofits or LEAs that operate our charter schools do have that autonomy. So in exchange, we do have to have this higher level of oversight. And it can make the family or the parent experience feel different in those two different systems. And so that's the reason behind that different experience that you're having with your two students. And regarding the second piece of your question, yes, absolutely. Parent and family and student experiences are very proximal, and you're going to be experiencing this school year while we are looking at our high stakes review at the prior 5 years. So definitely that's something we understand, and it's a tension that we deal with this process. I want to emphasize, though, that we have to make these decisions based on data that are accurate and validated and very solid. So a lot of that data, as Melody was just speaking about, are lagged from a timing perspective. So that really does play into this. We certainly don't want to be making high stakes decisions on data that are not, validated, accurate, and all of that. So that process takes time. And we do welcome parents and families to engage in the public comment process for the charter reviews and renewals. So on our website, 30 business days in advance of an LEA's charter review or renewal, we will post an open for public comment notice. And if parents or families feel either that there are major issues that you want to make sure we are aware of that are proximal, or that you are very proud and very happy with the school, you're more than welcome to submit a public comment to that effect.
Thank you.
If I may, Chair, I just wanted to add that one of the reasons that we definitely wanted to start off the review season this year with this presentation is to give a picture of what this process entails, the depth of the information that's going to be included, and quite frankly, empower parents to know that their school is under review. If they feel that they have not yet received the kind of information to know the performance of the school, that they should be able to ask that. And we fully expect, as Melody Sampson shared earlier, that this should not be new information to our school, to our families about the academic progress or the compliance of the school or even the financial health of the school, that there are mechanisms at our LEAs where parents are finding out in general how their school is doing, although they may not see all of the pieces come together in the way that it does for our review process. But it was very important to me and to our team that we talked about what this review process is before any of our schools came in front of you for this cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. Secretary Adam Afanio.
Thank you, Chair Wright. And again, I echo the sentiment of my fellow board members, Gina and Will, well done. And also, I just want to extend the congratulations also and a thank you to your team as well for conducting such thorough reviews. It's important work, and so far, so good, I'll say. Okay, so kind of building on what Dr. Walker Davis shared in terms of the schools and the review season. Gina, you mentioned that 20 schools are subject to review this school year, and which is plenty. And actually, can you go back and pull up that slide, if you will, of the schools that are up for review, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you do that, I suspect based on your presentation that those evaluations are underway. Can you give us some insights on some of your preliminary findings? Broadly speaking, what strengths and weaknesses are you seeing? And do you anticipate recommending the board issue conditions or initiate the charter revocation process for any of the 20 schools under review?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so to the first piece of your question, like broadly speaking, what strengths and weaknesses do we see? As you can imagine, with 20 LEAs, we do see a wide range of school performance. So we certainly have some strong performers in this cohort that show either satisfactory or excellent academic performance in terms of, ELA and math proficiency and growth, as well as contextual measures and the qualitative site reviews. These schools have complied with applicable laws, and they demonstrate satisfactory or strong financial management. And so for those schools, we certainly look forward to celebrating their accomplishments and issuing full charter continuance so families can continue benefiting. However, there are several schools in this cohort that exhibit academic performance deficiencies. Some of these schools also exhibit financial concerns, and some of them demonstrate compliance and or performance issues, academic performance issues regarding special populations, such as students with disabilities or emerging multilingual learners. And so we are currently deliberating internally about charter continuance at many of the schools that I'm speaking about. And we expect to issue conditions to some schools, which would mean that the school must meet an interim target in the years prior to their next review or face closure. And in some cases, we may recommend initiating charter revocation.
Thank you, Gina. Very clear.
Board Member Davis?
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks again, team. Really clear and concise presentation. So I'm gonna ask a question from a parent perspective. If I'm a parent who has a tendency to ask difficult questions, right, of the school leadership, the board, but I'm not getting answers that I feel are sufficient, what is my recourse?
Thank you, Board Member Davis. I would say, again, part of us having this presentation tonight is to ensure that folks understand the process and that they do feel empowered to ask those questions. And I would invite folks to consult not just the materials that we have on our website, but to reach out to our office if you feel like you don't really understand the data associated with your school or what exactly is the review process that your school is going through, or when information about how that school is performing on its review will be available. Please do reach out directly to our office. Our board chair starts all of the meetings with our information, but certainly feel free to reach out to PCSB, and I will make sure that I give you the exact email address that parents should reach out to shortly. But we welcome an opportunity to talk about not just the process, but any specific data that are available for an individual school that's under review. I don't know, Gina or Melody, if you had anything to add there.
I was just going to chime in with the email address. It is dcpublic@dcpubliccharter.com. And we'll be keeping our eyes on that inbox, particularly throughout this season to support families with the review and renewal cycle.
I just had one follow-up, if that's okay. So as a parent, is there a cadence that I should be listening out for? What should I be looking for, listening for? Should I try to attend the board meeting once every couple of months? Like, so what should my recourse be? Like, so what can I do, in the day-to-day?
I would definitely encourage, oh, I think I might have gotten the wrong email address. Sorry. It's dcpublic@dcpcsb.org. Sorry about that. Um, as far as families engaging on a regular basis with their schools and with PCSB, um, I don't want to put pressure on families. We know that families are busy trying to manage their day-to-day experience with their children, with their careers. But that's precisely why meetings like this one are recorded so that they're available at all times. Of course, consult our website. As Gina said and Dr. Walker Davis said earlier tonight, we've got lots of reporting over time on each LEA in our portfolio. And so hopefully that information will be helpful. And then, of course, I do encourage families to actually attend their school's open board meetings. That is where you're going to get the most relevant information about what's happening in your school. And then as far as, I think I heard you say, Member Davis, something about sort of like a cycle, the like cyclical nature of this kind of work. Absolutely, we do these reviews every 5 years at minimum. And so, as Gina mentioned earlier tonight, there is a calendar on our website that lets families know which year a school is up for review or renewal. That is when I would start to pay attention, in particular, as you're approaching that review or renewal year. And again, I'll do one more plug for the qualitative site review because it happens the year before the review or renewal. And that, again, is another resource that I think is really helpful and gives sort of a different cut, less quantitative view into how a school is performing.
And if I may, I would add one thing. Melody Sampson referred to our state education office earlier and the information that they publish annually. So around EdFest, we will have results from the state assessment that I would encourage parents to pay attention to. And ultimately, when we report on Aspire outcomes that include both the scores and the level for schools, that would be another touch point during an academic year that parents would need to be paying attention to, particularly if your school has adopted Aspire as its goals. That will be an indication of how the school is performing even prior to the review. And again, it is looking at the 5 years before. So if you're paying attention for each of those 5 years about how the school is performing, at least academically, there will be some sense of knowing the trend and the direction that the school is going in, both in a combination of our Aspire reporting, but also other academic information that's available at certain points in the year.
Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions. Jean, can you go back to slide 24? I think it was the one that's talking about condition, where there's discretion and versus where the board does not have discretion.
Yes, absolutely. It may be this one, it may be the next one that you're talking about, Chair, right? Do you want me to go one more? This one maybe?
No, it was the one you had before.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I just want to be clear here. Does this mean when it says that what the board shall do, not talking about the finance, we know that that goes regardless of the state, and that actually is even when we don't have reviews, right? That is required by the School Reform Act.
Right.
Is this to say that when there is a renewal, there are not conditions? Like one of the recommendations would not be conditions for schools?
Actually, that is a good question. So Chair Wright is speaking about charter renewals, which, just to reiterate, we don't have any up for this cycle, but certainly every 15 years a school will come up for its renewal. I believe, and Melody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have issued conditions at renewal before. Like, for example, I could see a scenario where the school met, well, I'm not gonna like speak off the cuff, but I think that conditions are possible as long as we are operating within the bounds of what this is stipulating. So we shall approve the renewal application as long as the school has complied with the law and met the charter goals. But Melody, have we ever issued conditions at renewal to your knowledge?
It's rare, but there are a few instances in which we have renewed a school with some conditions associated. However, from an academic standpoint, that school would have still have been deemed as meeting its charter goals, but then just had some sort of condition placed on top of its renewal.
Okay, so I think one of the questions that I have, and I know that this comes up a lot from schools when we get into conversations regarding especially conditions. I think it's clear when we renew, it's clear when we recommend to revoke. But when it comes to conditions, if you go back up, I think it was you gave an example of a special education condition. And I would say if I were reading through, or if I were listening from a public standpoint, or even a school leader preparing for this and having to explain to my community, many of the examples of those conditions seem like the basic requirements that we expect of all schools. And so my question is, why wouldn't we take a more stringent response at review or renewal stage if the basic requirement had not been met? So, right, and if you take, for example, this special education, what we're saying here in this example condition is what schools should be doing anyway, right? That is their basic requirement. It is law. It is also part of their charter, and it's part of being a public school. So why would we give a condition at the renewal or review stage versus taking some sort of action? Why would a condition be what they are supposed to do anyway? I can understand some of the other ones like decreasing enrollments, creating a plan for your procurement, some of the others. But when I see a condition like this, I would wonder, as I think others might, well, I am wondering, I think others might, why wouldn't we just be more stringent at that point?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chair Wright, and certainly, like, I think we do have the flexibility to be more stringent in a case like this. I think that one of the advantages to putting this as a condition, which gets written directly into the school's charter agreement, is that all parties are very much aware that, like, this immediate high stakes review in the last bolded line there could happen, or will happen, I should say, in the case of any non-compliance going forward. And all of our legal loopholes are, there's nothing that's written into the charter agreement. So it's very, like, legally solid too at that point. I think certainly there could have been a different decision made. This particular case, I think, was a 5-year school, so very young school that was an alternative school and had other challenges involved. And so some contextual information may have contributed to our board deciding to not be quite as stringent as what you were alluding to, Chair Wright. But yeah, certainly I think there's flexibility when we make these decisions to be more stringent or not.
I'll just add on. I noticed this bolded language that says that the school will remain compliant. And so what we found at the time of that school's review is that there were some instances of probably less severe noncompliance with requirements under IDEA. But ultimately, the school was generally compliant with its requirements. And what we were doing is just making sure that the school was on notice that they were responsible for fulfilling the law. And that, to Gina's latter point, ultimately, we would circle back to do a high stakes review if we did find, consistent non-adherence to the law.
Okay. I think it makes sense a bit to me when I hear it around a newer school, but I do think, and given the years that we have of some of the LEAs coming up, I just want to prepare the staff and the public around at least my position when it comes to conditions versus other recommendation actions, just understanding, because in essence, this is the high stakes review, right? Like the review that's coming up or that they're under is the high stakes review. And when it comes to non-compliance of laws and basic things that we unfortunately are seeing happen in our LEA, I think you'll find this board is taking a pretty stringent and clear stance on how we feel about those type of basic requirements. Schools get a lot of accountability, a lot of autonomy, excuse me, in exchange for the accountability that's there. So thank you for clarifying that. Board Member Rodriguez, I know you had a question, and then we have a couple follow-ups as well. So thank you,
Yes.
staff, this is important information. So thank you for working through this with us.
Thanks very much, team. I'm just thinking back to the all the work we did on Aspire and the charter school goals policy last year. And one thing that strikes me is that we are in a space where, for several years now, we've been operating under the COVID-19 policy. And it is really the implementation of Aspire and the new charter school goals policy that is going to slowly but surely take us out of that. Could you give us, and actually just the benefit of all those listening, an overview of kind of when some of these accountability measures will begin to come back for schools by school year over the next few school years? It doesn't need to be the complete, all the details, but just overall, an overall picture of what schools and parents and families can expect in these next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start. So as I think Melody may have mentioned earlier, as was mentioned earlier, the Aspire system has been developed and is being piloted, and the results for this current school year, so 24-25 data, will be published. We will not solely be using Aspire for 24-25 data as the sole measure of school performance by any means. We will still be offering through our charter goals policy what we call goal attainment pathways for school year 24-25, one of which is Aspire performance. And there are additional other pathways. If a school does not attain level 3 on Aspire, there are other ways that it can meet its goals for 24-25. And then from there, moving into the 25-26 and 26-27 school years, we are basically decreasing the number of pathways, which you can think of as like the number of different chances that a school has to meet its goals, until there are only the charter goals in the charter agreement, which is our typical practice. It was our pre-pandemic practice, and it's our typical practice. So by the time over the next 3 school years, I think it is, that we decrease the number of pathways, then the schools that have elected Aspire as their charter goals will have an Aspire target written into their charter agreement. And the schools with individually negotiated goals will have those individual goals in their charter agreement, and they will, from that point forward, have to meet those goals. And there won't essentially be any other additional pathways.
That's school year 26-27, right? I think when you say 3 years.
Is Melly, are you confirming? I don't have it in front of me.
That's right. That's the first year in which Aspire becomes the only pathway for schools that adopted Aspire / the PMF as their charter goals.
And I just think that's important, for the record. On the one hand, we have a gradual phasing in of Aspire that's important, but I also think it's important to note that, we have been operating in a system with multiple pathways for the better part of 5 years now, and will continue to do so on a decreasing basis for the next couple of years. But it is important, I think, for the accountability of our sector that we are eventually returning to the pre-pandemic norm, and this represents that, the application of these to that, and Aspire represents that, which I think is really, really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Rodriguez. Secretary Adamanfani, I know you had a follow-up.
Yep, thank you so much. Oh, the next question that comes to mind for me, and in light of the feedback or the public comment shared earlier tonight around the role of the board and education for parents, what is the role of the board during these reviews, what's the role of the board during these reviews, and what should be expected from the board?
Thanks for that question, Secretary Admofanian. So I'm just gonna give a brief overview of what happens at the public meeting for a school's charter review. Basically, our staff, DCPCSB staff, will put together our report. So it's a summary of findings regarding the school's academic compliance and financial performance. And we present our staff recommendation for the board's vote. So we will do our analysis. We will.
Gina, I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay.
I was speaking about the school's board. So the board for the school. So not us. I got it. Yeah.
So sorry, you're wondering about the role of the school's board in the charter
In
review
the-
process?
Yes.
That is an excellent question that I don't have much expertise on. So I would invite like Dr. Walker Davis or Melody to step in.
Yeah, I can get us started, and Dr. Walker Davis, if you want to take over, I welcome you to. The big reminder is that the other side of the charter agreement is the school's board. So ultimately, we are evaluating the school, but the school's board is responsible in that evaluation. And I think over time, you will see us prefer more about precisely what a school's board is responsible for doing, and we'll probably be reporting more about that. We already report on it some through our compliance processes, but I think that will start to take more airspace as we continue to refine our governance oversight work. But my hope this year, for example, when we have school leaders come before you to discuss their review, we have an expectation that the school's board member or members be a part of that conversation and be able to speak from their perspective about how the school is doing and what they look forward to through the next review cycle.
And I would just add that it is our expectation, again, because the LEA's board holds the charter with this board, that every board member is fully aware of what is in that agreement, what the expectations are for the school, that they understand what the school's standing is with respect to PCSB's recommendation. Certainly that they participate at the point of the review, but that if we have any conversations where we're lifting up concerns prior to that review, and we do that, we share a midpoint performance with the school prior to the review, that the board members are aware of that and are really asking questions of their LEA leadership about progress toward those goals and preparation for the review. And so we fully expect that any board member would be able to respond to that. But certainly we would anticipate that a board's chair, board's academic committee chair, the board's treasurer, or someone from the finance committee would be actively engaged throughout this process and ideally present at the time of the charter review.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I don't think there are any more questions from the board. I just want to reiterate our thanks to Gina, Melody, and all of the PCSB staff, Will, as well, for this presentation. One of the things that I hope the public sees, particularly with Dr. Walker Davis and her team's leadership, the push for more transparency. I think the board has always worked to be transparent, but also to educate the public on what it is that we're doing so that you understand what's happening. And what I would ask for our external partners like PAVE and the Alliance and so forth that are on this call or participating, that to also continue to partner with us to help make this information available to the public, continue to direct folks to the website to gather information. School leaders, please use the staff as resources for educating your families. I think I heard it said in public comment something about, parents not knowing. As you heard from board members, that is very important to us, that families do know and are educated about what's going on in school. So it's going to take all of us in this. And so I just want to thank the staff for the time that it takes to put these presentations together and the thoroughness of which you work to continue to educate the public on what it is that we're doing. So as you heard, our first reviews will begin in March. And so between now and that meeting time, please, public, continue to engage with us, follow up, watch this recording, look at the resources, et cetera, as we continue to bring information to you and educate both families, boards, and school communities. So thank you, Gina and team, Will and team, Melody and team. I guess that's all of you all, right? For what it is that you do. And so now this concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the January 27th, 2025 meeting and agenda.
I second.
Secretary Adamafania, can we have a roll call?
Yes. Chairwoman Wright,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Crucy,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
and Board Member Stanley Beatty, by proxy, approved. Say aye. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record? Right. Okay. Colleagues, I will now entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I second.
Secretary Adamafania, can we have a roll call?
Chairwoman Wright,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Crucy,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Aye.
I am an aye, and Board Member Stanley Beatty through proxy is an aye as well.
Thank you. Motion passes. Is there any new business? Okay. Seeing none, colleagues, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the January 27th, 2025 board meeting.
I second.
One more roll call for us, please, Secretary.
Absolutely. Chairwoman Wright,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Crucy,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty through proxy gave an aye, and I am an aye as well.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you. I will close the meeting now. Thank you.